Intramembranous ossification, on the other hand, is about building bone ossification after blood vessels arrive. This is later. This one doesn't even start until month 3 or 4. We never have a cartilage model. We start with dense membrane of mesenchyme. And what we do is we wrap the brain and the clavicle. Well, we make the clavicle out of this. We have a dense layer of mesenchyme. The reason the clavicle gets made this way is it is a developmental landmark because the clavicle is the most easily broken bone during childbirth of the child. The infant breaks their clavicle because when the baby's shoulders meets mom's pelvis, the clavicle will sometimes snap in order to give leeway through the birth canal. Now, if that was made out of hyaline cartilage, it would never repair, and you'd always wind up with this very short bone. Because the clavicle is mesenchyme, mesenchyme has no problem healing, and the bone is able to heal within just a few weeks, and they barely pay much attention to it other than a safety pin and just immobilization. So that's why the clavicle is made out of this intramembranous ossification. And the key here is we start with this very dense membrane of mesenchyme around the brain. And that's because the brain has to grow so fast. Remember how much the brain grows? Think about a child's brain versus an adult head. We're growing almost 4 times the space. So we need the bones to be able to separate and provide the space for the brain to grow. This starts later, so blood vessels have already arrived because the brain always gets blood vessels first. Primary ossification in intramembranous ossification is that we start with this very dense layer of mesenchyme tissue, and then at various points along the skull, some of these mesenchyme cells will mature, sometimes what's called differentiation, into osteoblasts. You can actually see this on a newborn infant, where you see the little knobs on the top of the head. That's the primary ossification site. The big soft spot on an infant is actually mesenchyme. It's the growth space so that the membrane will stretch. That soft spot doesn't actually fully close until about 2, and eventually, but we still have spaces in the sutures, and those do not fully finish forming until your 20s. Some people won't even solidly calcify until their 40s. So your skull is actually in constant transition. So the primary begins with mesenchyme, goes straight to osteoblasts, which is different because we have no cartilage here. So as it grows outward, and remember, osteoblasts still grow on the edge, so there they are on their edge, and we get this osteocyte. Here I'm outlining the lacuna in the red. The osteocytes complete the osteoid, which is the proteins. So as soon as they build enough proteins around the bone structure, even before it's fully calcified, they become osteocytes. Remember, cytes can no longer divide. So all the blasts are on the outside, all the cytes are on the inside, and that grows outwards from there, right? Because this is all about appositional growth. It is intramembranous ossification, but it's still appositional growth. So we keep moving, and we're going to mature where we still have osteoblasts on the edge and still growing outwards. In the center, we have that spongy bone or trabecular bone, and then we have the layers of dense bone. We have the vascularization moving through, and it will continue to grow on the edges, which are the sutures before they fully seal. Here's a photograph of real bone. So you see that much like the other bone, we still have this layer of very dense bone on the outside, or compact bone, and the center is filled with spongy bone. The big difference here is that we have no marrow shaft. There's no long shaft because this is a flat bone. So this is how this forms.